The stagecoach rattled to a stop outside Copper Creek, kicking up dust that swirled like golden specters in the late afternoon sun. 22-year-old Theodora Bailey clutched her small valise with trembling fingers, her heart pounding against her ribs like a frightened bird. This desolate Montana town would be her new home if Mr. Randall Swenson accepted her as his bride. The year was 1876, and Theodora had traveled over 1,000 miles from Boston following an exchange of 3 letters and the promise of a new life. Her parents' passing had left her with few options in the East. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like providence. Successful rancher seeks gentle, educated wife. Passage paid. End of the line, miss, the driver called, already unloading her trunk. Theodora stepped down from the coach, her legs unsteady after days of travel. Copper Creek consisted of one dusty main street lined with wooden buildings, a general store, saloon, small church, and what appeared to be a bank. Nothing like the brick-lined streets of Boston she'd left behind. A portly man with an impressive mustache approached. "Miss Bailey?" "Randall Swenson." He looked her up and down with obvious disappointment. "You're younger than I expected." "I'm 22, sir," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "As I mentioned in my letters." He frowned. "Speak up, girl. I can hardly hear you." Theodora cleared her throat. "I said I'm 22, sir." Randall's frown deepened. "I need a woman who can manage a household, give orders to ranch hands, and host business associates. You seem—" He waved his hand dismissively, timid. "This won't do at all." Heat flooded Theodora's cheeks. "I assure you, Mr. Swenson, I am quite capable." "I've made my decision," he interrupted. "The arrangement won't work. I'll pay for a room at the boarding house for tonight. The stage heads back east tomorrow morning." Before she could respond, he turned on his heel and marched away, leaving her standing alone on the street, her future evaporating like morning dew under the harsh western sun. Tears threatened, but Theodora refused to break down in public. A woman emerged from the general store, sympathy written across her weathered face. "Don't mind Randall," she said. "He's been through 3 mail-order brides already. I'm Martha Jenkins. I run the boarding house." "Theodora Bailey," she whispered, then forced herself to speak louder. "Thank you for your kindness. Come along, dear. You look exhausted." The boarding house was simple but clean. Martha showed her to a small room and promised a hot meal would be waiting when she was ready. Alone, Theodora finally allowed her tears to fall. Her small savings would afford a ticket back east, but to what? No family, few prospects, and now the humiliation of rejection. The following morning, Theodora couldn't bring herself to board the eastbound stage. Instead, she found herself in Martha's kitchen, helping prepare breakfast for the other boarders. "You've got a deft hand with those biscuits," Martha commented. "Ever worked in a kitchen before?" "I helped our cook in Boston," Theodora replied, her voice still quiet but steadier than yesterday. "After my parents died, I took over the household until the money ran out." Martha studied her thoughtfully. "You know, I could use help around here. It wouldn't pay much, but you'd have room and board until you figure things out." Relief flooded through Theodora. "I'd be most grateful." Word spread quickly in the small town about the mail-order bride Randall Swenson had rejected. Most folks were kind, but Theodora felt the weight of curious stares whenever she ventured outside the boarding house. She kept to herself, speaking only when necessary, finding comfort in the quiet routine of cleaning rooms and helping in the kitchen. 2 weeks after her arrival, Theodora was hanging laundry in the yard when a deep voice startled her. "Afternoon, madam." She turned to find a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky watching her. His clothes were dusty from the trail, and he removed his hat, revealing hair the color of wheat. "I'm looking for Martha," he said. Got some supplies for her. Theodora pointed toward the house, unable to find her voice. The man smiled. Thank you, miss. She watched him walk away, noting his confident stride and broad shoulders. Later, Martha informed her that the man was Ethan Holbrook, who owned a small ranch outside town. Good man, that Ethan, Martha said. Keeps to himself mostly. Lost his parents to fever 5 years back. Been running the ranch alone since then. Over the next month, Ethan appeared regularly at the boarding house delivering eggs, milk, and occasionally fresh meat. Each time, he tipped his hat to Theodora and offered a gentle smile. She found herself looking forward to his visits, though she rarely managed more than a few words in his presence. One afternoon in late summer, Theodora was alone in the boarding house when Ethan arrived with a basket of vegetables from his garden. Afternoon, Miss Bailey, he greeted, placing the basket on the kitchen table. Good afternoon, Mr. Holbrook, she replied, her voice soft but clear. Martha's gone to visit Mrs. Collins. Her baby's coming. Ethan nodded. Then I'll leave these with you. He hesitated, then added, Fine day outside. Shame to spend it all indoors. Theodora glanced out the window at the golden sunshine. Yes, it is lovely. I've got some errands in town. Would you care to walk with me? If your duties allow it, that is. Her heart fluttered like a startled dove. I finished my morning chores. Then perhaps you'd join me? Minutes later, they strolled down the main street of Copper Creek. Ethan didn't seem bothered by her silence, instead pointing out buildings and telling stories about the town's early days. My pa was one of the first settlers here, he explained. Built our ranch from nothing but wilderness and hope. That must have taken great courage, Theodora said. Ethan glanced at her. Different kind of courage than it takes to travel across the country to marry a stranger. Heat rose to her cheeks. Not so courageous, considering how it turned out. They stopped outside the general store. Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious. Swenson's a fool. Some men can't appreciate the value of a quiet spirit. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the saloon. A man staggered out, clearly drunk despite the early hour, shouting obscenities. Ethan stepped protectively in front of Theodora. That's enough, Barton, he called. Go sleep it off. The drunk squinted at them. Well, if it ain't the silent rancher and the rejected bride. Perfect match, neither of you got much to say. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. Move along, Barton. The man spat in the dirt and stumbled away. Ethan turned back to Theodora, whose face had gone pale. I apologize for that, he said. No need. He spoke the truth. Her voice was barely audible. I should return to the boarding house. Ethan walked her back in silence. At the door, he hesitated. Miss Bailey, would you permit me to call on you properly sometime? Surprise rendered her momentarily speechless. Why would you want to do that? His smile was gentle. Because in all the noise of this rough town, your quiet feels like peace to me. The words lingered in Theodora's mind long after Ethan departed. No one had ever valued her reserved nature before. In Boston, she'd been constantly urged to speak up, to assert herself. Her parents had worried her shyness would prevent her from making a good match. Even Mr. Swenson had rejected her for the very same reason. Yet Ethan Holbrook found peace in her quiet. The following Sunday, he appeared at the boarding house dressed in his best clothes, hat in hand, and asked if she might accompany him to church. They sat side by side in the small whitewashed building, their shoulders occasionally brushing. Theodora was acutely aware of the curious glances from other parishioners, but Ethan seemed unbothered. After the service, he invited her for a walk along the creek that gave the town its name. The afternoon was warm, the aspens along the water beginning to turn golden with the approach of autumn. Tell me about Boston, Ethan said as they walked. Theodora spoke haltingly at first, then with growing confidence about the cobblestone streets, the harbor with its forest of masts, the libraries and theaters. Ethan listened attentively, asking questions that drew her out further. "Do you miss it?" he asked. She considered the question. "I miss certain aspects, the bookshops particularly, but Boston holds painful memories too." "Your parents?" Theodora nodded. "After they died, I discovered my father had been deeply in debt. Everything was sold to pay the creditors. I had nowhere to go. So you answered Swenson's advertisement." It seemed the only option at the time. She hesitated. "Now I'm not certain what I'll do. Martha has been kind, but I can't impose on her forever." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "My ranch is doing well. I've been thinking of expanding, maybe adding more cattle next year." He picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. "Place needs a woman's touch, though. Gets lonely out there." Theodora's heart skipped a beat, but she remained silent, unsure of his meaning. "I'm not good with fancy words, Miss Bailey, but I'd like to continue calling on you, if you're agreeable." "I'd like that very much, Mr. Holbrook." His smile lit up his entire face. "Ethan, please. Then you must call me Theodora." She paused, then added softly, "Though most people called me Thea before." "Thea," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "It suits you." Throughout the autumn, Ethan courted Theodora with a gentle persistence that gradually coaxed her from her shell. He brought her books from his late mother's collection, took her on rides to see the surrounding countryside, and spent evenings on the boarding house porch, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, simply enjoying the companionable silence as the stars emerged above the mountains. Theodora found herself relaxing in his presence, the knot of anxiety that had been her constant companion since childhood slowly loosening. In October, Ethan invited her to visit his ranch. Martha, acting as chaperone, accompanied them on the 5-mile journey. The Holbrook Ranch was modest compared to Swenson's sprawling operation, but well-maintained with a sturdy 2-story house, a barn, and several outbuildings. "My father built this house for my mother when they married," Ethan explained as he showed them around. "Added the 2nd floor when I was born." The interior was simple but comfortable, though clearly lacking a woman's touch. The kitchen was functional but sparse, the parlor furnished with sturdy pieces that had seen better days. "It's a fine home," Theodora said sincerely. Martha excused herself to inspect the henhouse, leaving them alone in the parlor. Ethan cleared his throat nervously. "Thea, I've been thinking a lot about the future. My future, specifically." He took her hand in his. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life." Theodora's pulse quickened. "Ethan, I'm not asking for an answer today," he hastened to add. "Just want you to know my intentions are serious. When you're ready, if you ever are, I'd be honored to make this your home." Tears pricked her eyes. "You hardly know me. I know what matters. You're kind and gentle, hardworking. You listen more than you speak, which means when you do say something, it's worth hearing." His blue eyes held hers. "And when I'm with you, everything feels right." Before she could respond, Martha returned, effectively ending the private moment. But on the ride back to town, Theodora's mind was filled with images of the ranch house transformed into a home their home. Winter descended on Copper Creek with a vengeance. Heavy snows made travel difficult, but Ethan still made the journey to town whenever weather permitted. During one particularly harsh blizzard, he stayed at the boarding house for 3 days, helping Martha with repairs and spending evenings by the fire with Theodora. On Christmas Eve, the townspeople gathered at the church for a modest celebration. Theodora had helped decorate with pine boughs and candles, and even contributed to the community dinner, baking pies that earned appreciative comments. Ethan watched her interact with the other women, noting how she still spoke softly but no longer seemed afraid of her own voice. When she laughed at something Martha said, the sound made his heart swell. After the celebration, he walked her back to the boarding house through gently falling snow. Stars peeked between clouds, and lanterns glowed in windows along the street. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small package from his coat pocket. Theodora unwrapped it carefully to find a delicate silver locket. "Ethan, it's beautiful. It was my mother's," he explained. "Inside is a sprig of sage from the ranch. Pa always said sage meant home." She opened the locket to find the tiny dried sprig, then looked up at him with shining eyes. "Would you help me put it on?" His fingers were surprisingly nimble as he fastened the chain around her neck. When he finished, he didn't step away but instead gazed down at her, his expression tender. "Merry Christmas, Thea," he whispered, then leaned down to place a gentle kiss on her lips. It was her first kiss, sweet and brief, but it sent warmth cascading through her despite the cold night air. "Merry Christmas, Ethan," she replied, her voice steady and sure. January brought influenza to Copper Creek. Martha's boarding house became an impromptu hospital as she and Theodora cared for the sick. Ethan joined the effort, bringing supplies from his ranch and helping care for the men who had no family to tend them. The doctor from the next town over finally arrived, but by then, several townspeople had succumbed to the illness. Theodora worked tirelessly, her natural quietness giving way to calm authority as she directed the care of patients. "You've got a gift for nursing," the doctor told her after watching her soothe a feverish child. "Ever consider training formally?" She shook her head. "This is just doing what needs to be done." When the worst of the epidemic passed, Ethan found Theodora alone in the boarding house kitchen, exhausted but still on her feet, preparing broth for the remaining patients. "You need rest," he said, gently taking the ladle from her hand. "There's still so much to do," she protested weakly. "It can wait." He guided her to a chair. "You've been amazing, Thea. Everyone's talking about how you stepped up." She shook her head. "I just did what was necessary." "That's the thing about you," he said, sitting across from her. "You don't see your own strength." Theodora looked at him with tired eyes. "What strength? I'm the woman too shy to speak above a whisper. Remember? Strength isn't always loud, Thea. Sometimes it's in the quiet moments, staying calm when others panic, persevering when others give up." He reached across the table to take her hand. "You've shown more courage these past weeks than most men I know." His words pierced the armor of inadequacy she'd worn for so long. Tears slipped down her cheeks as years of being told she wasn't enough, wasn't bold enough, wasn't assertive enough began to crack and fall away. Ethan moved to kneel beside her chair, gathering her hands in his. "Theodora Bailey, I love you, not in spite of your quietness, but because of who you are entirely. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, she smiled. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, I will marry you, Ethan Holbrook." His answering smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms. They were married in early April, when the first wildflowers began to dot the prairie. The ceremony in Copper Creek's small church was attended by most of the town. Randall Swenson was conspicuously absent, though Theodora found she didn't mind. His rejection had led her to something far more precious than she could have imagined. Martha had helped her sew a simple white dress, and Ethan had ordered a gold band from a jeweler in Helena. The minister smiled benevolently as they exchanged vows, Theodora's voice soft but clear as she promised to love and honor her husband. The reception was held at the boarding house, with tables set up in the yard under budding trees. There was music from fiddles and guitars, dancing, and plenty of food contributed by neighbors. Theodora found herself the center of attention, accepting congratulations and well wishes from people who had become friends over the months since her arrival. "Mrs. Holbrook," Ethan murmured in her ear as they shared a dance. "How does it sound?" "Perfect," she replied, resting her head against his chest. That evening, he drove her to the ranch, their ranch now in a wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers by the town's children. As they approached, Theodora gasped. The house was illuminated with lanterns, and over the door hung a wooden sign, "Welcome home, Thea." "When did you do this?" she asked. "Had some help from friends," he admitted. "Wanted it to be special for you." Inside, she found more surprises. The parlor had been freshly painted, new curtains hung at the windows, and a rocking chair sat beside the fireplace. "Martha helped me choose things she thought you'd like," Ethan explained, watching her reaction anxiously. "Is it all right?" Theodora turned to him, her heart so full she could hardly speak. "It's more than all right. It's perfect." He took her in his arms then, his kiss deeper and more urgent than the chaste ones they'd shared during their courtship. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I should show you the rest of the house," he said, his voice husky. She nodded, suddenly shy again. "Yes, please." The master bedroom had been prepared with fresh linens and a vase of early spring flowers on the dresser. A nightgown one Theodora had embroidered during the winter evenings was laid out on the bed. "I'll give you some privacy," Ethan said, stepping back toward the door. "Take all the time you need." When he returned later, she was sitting on the edge of the bed in her nightgown, hair loose around her shoulders. The oil lamp cast a golden glow over the room. "You're so beautiful," he said, crossing to sit beside her. "I still can't believe you're really here." She reached up to touch his face. "I never thought anyone would want me as I am. I wouldn't want you any other way." He captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Your quiet is my peace, Thea. Always." That night, Ethan showed her with gentle hands and tender words how deeply he valued every part of her. And Theodora discovered that in the sanctuary of his love, she could find her voice sometimes in whispers, sometimes in passionate cries, but always authentically hers. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch flourished under their combined care. Theodora planted a garden, turned the sparse kitchen into a warm, welcoming space, and made curtains for every window. Ethan added more cattle to their herd and began building a second barn with help from neighbors. In July, Martha visited for dinner, beaming with approval at the transformation of the ranch house. "You've made this place a real home," she told Theodora as they washed dishes together. "And Ethan looks happier than I've ever seen him." "He's changed my life," Theodora admitted. "Helped me see value in myself I never knew was there." Martha nodded wisely. "The right partner does that. Speaking of which, have you told him your news yet?" Theodora's hand went instinctively to her stomach. "How did you know?" "I raised for children of my own," Martha chuckled. "I recognized the signs." Later that evening, after Martha had gone, Theodora and Ethan sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice quiet but steady. He sounded drowsy and content. "We're going to have a baby. Around Christmas, the doctor thinks." Ethan went completely still, then turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "A baby? You're sure?" She nodded, suddenly nervous. "Are you happy about it?" His answer was to pull her into his arms, his face buried in her hair. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Thea. A baby." He placed his hand gently on her still flat abdomen. "Our baby." As summer waned into autumn, Theodora's body changed, growing round with new life. Ethan treated her like precious glass, though she assured him she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. "The women in my family have always been healthy birthers," she told him. "My mother had 5 children, and I was the last." Still, he insisted on taking over the heavier chores and hired a local boy to help with the ranch work so he could be close to home. His protectiveness both amused and touched her. In October, they attended the Harvest Festival in town. It was the first time many townspeople had seen Theodora since her condition had become obvious, and she received countless congratulations and well-meaning advice. Randall Swenson was there, looking uncomfortable when he spotted them. After some hesitation, he approached. "Mrs. Holbrook," he said, nodding stiffly. "You're looking well." "Thank you, Mr. Swenson," she replied, her voice soft but composed. "I hope your ranch is prospering." "Well enough." He glanced at her rounded belly, then at Ethan. "Seems you found what you were looking for after all." "I found something far better than what I was looking for," she said, taking Ethan's hand. "I found where I belong." As they walked away, Ethan squeezed her hand. "Proud of you," he murmured. She smiled up at him. "I've learned that speaking up isn't so frightening when you know you're valued either way." December brought heavy snows and the anticipation of Christmas and their child. Ethan fretted about the weather, worried about getting the doctor if needed, but Theodora remained serene. "The baby will come when it's ready," she told him, "and we'll manage." On Christmas Eve, just as they had prepared for bed, Theodora felt the first pains. By dawn on Christmas Day, after hours of labor with only Ethan and their nearest neighbor's wife to help, their daughter was born a healthy girl with a dusting of wheat-colored hair and her mother's dark eyes. "Elizabeth," Theodora whispered, cradling the swaddled infant. "After your mother." Ethan, sitting on the bed beside them, looked awestruck. "She's perfect, like her mother." "I was so afraid," Theodora admitted. "Not of the pain, but of being a mother. What if I'm too quiet, too reserved? What if she needs someone stronger?" "Thea," Ethan said, stroking her damp hair back from her forehead. "You are the strongest person I know. Our daughter is lucky to have you as her mother." She looked down at the tiny face. "I want her to be confident in herself, to know her worth." "She will." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Because we'll teach her that strength comes in many forms, that sometimes the quietest voice carries the most wisdom, and that being herself, whoever that turns out to be, is always enough." As the winter sun rose over the snow-covered ranch, casting golden light through the bedroom window, Theodora Bailey Holbrook held her family close and found that her heart was no longer quiet but singing with joy a private symphony of contentment and love. 5 years later, the Holbrook Ranch had grown considerably. A second barn now stood beside the first. The cattle herd had tripled in size, and the house had been expanded to include 2 more bedrooms. Elizabeth, now a spirited 5-year-old, had been joined by 3-year-old Thomas and infant James. Theodora stood on the porch, watching Ethan teach Elizabeth to ride her pony in the fenced yard while Thomas toddled after them, determined not to be left out. James slept peacefully in her arms, his tiny hand curled around her finger. The shy Boston girl who had arrived in Copper Creek expecting to be Randall Swenson's wife was almost unrecognizable now. While Theodora would never be loud or boisterous, she had found her voice as a wife, a mother, and even as a respected member of the community. She now taught reading at the school 1 day a week and had organized a lending library from her growing collection of books. Ethan glanced up and caught her watching. His smile, still as warm as the day they met, sent a familiar flutter through her heart. He said something to Elizabeth, then crossed the yard to join Theodora on the porch. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Holbrook," he said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "I was just thinking how fortunate I am," she replied. How everything that seemed like misfortune led me here, to this life, to you. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I'm the fortunate one. Every day I wake up grateful that Randall Swenson was fool enough to let you go. She laughed softly. His loss, your gain? The greatest gain of my life. Ethan gazed out at their ranch, their children, the life they'd built together. Your quiet has been my peace, Thea. But it's more than that now. Your love has been my strength, my joy, my everything. As the Montana sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, painting the prairie in gold and amber, Theodora leaned into her husband's embrace, surrounded by the beautiful life they had created together, a life built on understanding, acceptance, and the profound peace they found in each other's hearts.